Uh, uh,
Hey, Jason.
Yep. All right.
Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome in. We have some really special guests today. Combined, they have 40 years of experience in sales enablement and demand gen marketing, as well as sales. So we have Adam Kucera, Sales Director at Uniphore, and Jason Hubbard, Chief Operating Officer here at Rev Genius. So make sure you give Uniphore a follow on their LinkedIn. Their link will be in the chat on Zoom and in the comments if you're joining us from LinkedIn Live. So now to turn it over to the experts, Adam, Jason, how are you guys doing this afternoon?
We're great. Awesome. Well, Adam, thanks for having you or for being on with us. Excited to dig in and hear what you guys are working on over there, because it's very near and dear to myself, as well as a lot of the tactics and things that I've used successfully over the years.
Yeah, thanks, Jason. It is definitely something that, you know, we're all very passionate about over here at Uniphore and the Q for Sales team specifically. You know, we're all salespeople at heart. We've all been through these things, and we understand that, you know, whether it's the pandemic's push towards virtual engagements, whether it's kind of the latest economy shifts, you know, all those different things right now, and especially right now, as a lot of people are coming to the end of their fiscal year, there's a lot of pressure, right? Even more pressure. And so felt like it was really a good time to have this conversation, help to prioritize, help to think about those interactions that we're having with our potential clients and with others a little bit differently.
Yeah, especially with what's going on right now with, you know, the economy and everybody really tightening belts and trying to get prepared for whatever is going to come next year. Everybody's trying to get more efficient. And the thing that I've heard more and more and more is that, hey, our old tactics are just not working anymore. And so it's like, it's sort of a double whammy. You know, the way things used to be and the things that were working aren't working anymore. Right at the same time, everybody's really having to get a whole lot more lean and a whole lot more efficient.
Yeah, there's no question about it. I mean, everything you just said, right? Whether it's the tactics, whether it's getting to potential clients to have that pitch or have that conversation, whether it's keeping them engaged and getting them to the end of a deal cycle, you name it. Everything has been impacted and continues to shift. We're certainly not at the end of it. It's not like it's all, you know, settled out and we just got to figure it out from here. You know, we got to continue to adapt. But, you know, I think some of the things that we'll talk about today, Jason, are very, you know, omnipresent no matter what the situation is, right? And it's really about the relationships and understanding kind of the emotional state, both of ourselves as well as the people that we're engaged with.
Yeah, and I mean, I couldn't agree more. It just came off of a LinkedIn Live that I was hosting, and it's the umpteenth time I've had the conversation. But the thing I keep hearing more and more and coming back to is intent signaling, and actually getting through to what people's intentions and desires are is more critical than ever. And, you know, on the positive, hopeful side of that, though, is technology and visibility into these things is in a place that's, you know, more sophisticated and more comprehensive than it's ever been. It's a bit of a gap trying to get people to understand that, how to leverage it and how to leverage it effectively. But from a technology and signaling standpoint, like, we're actually in a better place than we ever have right at the time that we really need it.
Yeah, I think there's 2 points there, and then I think we'll jump into the conversation here a little bit and really start to zone in on it. But, you know, it is definitely technology, right? Technology is coming along to help, right? We've always just been relied on our notebooks, our notes, our memory, which is always not always as trustworthy at times. And so we can start to rely on the technology that is available to us to help us in understanding what's going on with those conversations, to help us take notes, to help us potentially even record those conversations, go back and review that, bring in experts from within our team and do a better job of that. And then again, from an intent standpoint, a lot of our intent in the past has been, are they showing up for the call? You know, am I getting the deal? Did they sign the agreement and so on? And certainly those things still matter, but there are so many smaller micro signals that are occurring, not just in emails, but also on those face-to-face interactions. And that's what we're going to talk about today.
Awesome.
Well, let's get
excited to
into it
learn
a little
more.
bit. So the first thing that I want to talk about, and I want everybody that's listening in to kind of think about, and it's the holidays, so this should be really easy. Think about the last thing that you purchased, right? It could have been for you, it could have been for a family member, it could have been, this is anything, right? This is any purchase that you've recently made. And think about, why did you choose that item? Why did you choose that item, meaning that category, to make that purchase overall? But even more granularly, why did you choose that specific thing? So why did you choose that very, very specific thing? And it really, I want you to think about the emotions that you had when you were doing that. So I'm going to actually pick, I'll start off here. One of the last things that I picked was a Christmas present. It was a Christmas present for my son. He and I are both sneakerheads, Jason. We both love shoes. We're both into Jordans and a lot of different sneakers. And I wanted to get him something that he would not only appreciate, but to be quite honest, I wanted him to have the emotion of being able to go back to college after the break, have those sneakers, have people make those comments, and have him have that kind of impact, if you will, from that gift. So for me, there was a lot that went into that. It wasn't, I just care about the size and maybe the color. It was, what was that thing that I knew when he took that back, and after he opened that present, took it back to college, is something that would stick with him. So that's where, again, that emotion came from me. Jason, do you have any recent purchases that kind of had some of that same level of interest for you?
Yeah, actually, the one I had in mind was 90+% emotion. So right before Black Friday and Thanksgiving, all of that, I saw an article where Herman Miller, who had who makes the chair that I'm sitting in right now, had just partnered with Logitech to create a new chair. And I was like, man, that looks really cool. It's like, I cannot justify buying that thing. And then Black Friday rolls around and it was like 40% off. And I was like, okay. And so, yeah, I pulled the trigger on it, and now eagerly waiting for it to get here.
And it seems like, because you already have one of those, right? There, a brand loyalty and a brand awareness, certainly it really impacted that decision, right, Jason?
Oh, absolutely. But I mean, at the same time, it's like, there's nothing wrong with the chair I'm sitting in. It was purely an emotional, like, okay, that looks really cool and I really kind of want it. And now you slash the price on it. It's like, all right, here, take my money.
Yeah. And you know what, we're making, a little bit, a lighter view on some of these purchases, but, whether it's purchasing these, these gifts, or purchasing things for ourselves, or if, there are buying groups within an organization that are considering buying a technology from, anybody that's watching today, there is emotion into that, right? Is this a product that's going to help me or help my team or my organization succeed? Is this something that is going to, especially for some of those that are in more of an enablement space, right? Is this something that is going to help, leverage the training that I've given to the sales organization, or whatever the case might be? So there is a lot of emotion, and we all have that in us, whether we even think about it or not. And that's where it comes into this, right? Is that we're not even thinking about it most of the time, right? Harvard business professor there, 95% of those buying decisions are subconscious, right? We're not even thinking about it. We're probably trying to put a little bit of logic on it, right? This is going to help me make those goals. This is something that I was asked to do. I have X amount of budget that I need to spend, all those things that are a little bit more logical. But why am I making that decision? Why am I choosing that particular company? Or why am I, narrowing it down to the top 2 or 3? What makes those the most important? And within that, there's a lot of that subconscious. And just to kind of think about the relationship between, the salesperson and the buyer, right? The buyer is also viewing us individually, not just our product, right? And I think there's a tremendous amount of, whether it's buyers, whether it's just, people that get our emails and our outreaches and so on, right? There's probably a sense that, listen, sales guys, we all just are sitting on beaches, we're always at SKOs, somewhere sandy, and this is what our lives are like. But I guarantee you that everybody that's tuned in today, Jason, know that this is a little bit more of our reality, right? We are constantly trying to do that outreach, do that follow-up, remember who we met at a conference, or try to make that connection. We're all on LinkedIn. I know that we're on LinkedIn Live right now as well. We are looking at LinkedIn. Who are connections that I should reach out to? Where are those people that I need to make that connection to hopefully have that sales conversation? And it's difficult, right? And that's one of the things that I want to talk through here a little bit, is that what we all do as salespeople is hard. It's really hard because there is so much going on, and obviously there is an element here that we'll really dig into, that interaction, but we have so much going on. And as we start to prioritize those things, I want to give the group some tools to help focus some of their attention on those deals that might need that, or could get us to the finish line a little quicker. So what I'm seeing, and hopefully everybody's agreeing, and obviously people can drop comments into the chat and questions as well. And Jason, I know you're going to help me with some of those, but we have limited access, right? Every single one of us, even let alone senior executives, some of our target audience are getting bombarded with emails, calls, right? LinkedIn connections. I do it to them every day. I know that so many people do as well. And I get it myself. And so there's limited access. People are really starting to get a lot more closed off. So when we do get a chance to have that conversation, we definitely have to take advantage of it, and really think about and be very, very observant when we have those interactions. Jason, is that something that you see as well?
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, sort of one of the things we kicked off with, which is everybody's having to be more efficient these days with what they have and do more with less. And so, the focusing on the things that you really need to, disregarding, ignoring the things you don't, figuring out what's working, what's not, doubling down on what is, abandoning, figuring out why something that didn't work, wasn't effective.
Yep.
All of these things went from like sort of best practices, the top level people are doing this and the rest of us can sort of skate by, to like, if you're not doing this, you may not make it. And so people are having to really level up their game really quickly around these things.
Yeah, there's no question. And, continued studies have shown that, 40 to 60% of these that fall off, they lose interest, they get distracted. And we continue to, try to fight through those. And again, we're going to kind of see how to view some of those here in just a second. But that buyer indecision is where, that really, is visual from our standpoint as a salesperson, is, whether they're, hey, I can't meet this week, I can't meet again next week, right? That meeting gets pushed off. Potentially our decision makers that we're really depending on getting on board with what we're trying to get them to purchase, can't make that next meeting, maybe is off for a couple meetings. So we're trying to, get them re-engaged. It can be very difficult when it comes to, that indecision when we are actually engaged with a potential client. And then on the other side of it, it gets tiring, right? There is real burnout from a sales perspective, especially when we get down to end of quarters, end of the fiscal year, right? We are stressing. We're trying to get to that finish line. We're trying to take that deal that has been on the table for months and maybe even longer than a month or a number of months, right? Quarters. And we're trying to bring that home. And we can only control so much of it, right? We can only control so much. If we've got 10, 20 deals out there or potential ones in different phases, where should we spend our time, right? And that's something that we're going to talk about here in just a minute. But I think these are real, and I wanted to acknowledge those for everybody on the call, right? Everybody that's listening in, these are real. right? And, it's important that we understand that these exist, and we don't just go about it every day and just simply look at Salesforce or Dynamics or wherever we have our CRM and say, well, I've got X number of opportunities open. Why aren't they all closing tomorrow? Well, that's not a good way to approach that. And it will get you in a situation where you just get super frustrated if you can't break that down into some elements. And we're going to do that, Jason, with an exercise a little bit later to help identify how to break down those opportunities and know where to focus.
Yeah, and even if you're not a rep that's feeling that pain yourself or self-motivated around that, if you've got a CRO, a VP of sales, whatever, that's really doing their job, then they're hounding you over why are your opportunity stages not tracking with actually what's going to convert. And so anytime you're working under anybody that's any good in those leadership roles, like, they're going to pound you over that stuff, and for good reason, because you've got to be able to predict revenue and what's going to come in with some degree of certainty. And so having reps that are just doing it based off of emotion or willy-nilly or whatever is never going to be a good way to get something in a place where it's going to be particularly effective or trackable.
Yeah, no, without question. And what's on screen here, right? We are in now a virtual world most of the time, right? We are all starting to travel more. We're definitely starting to have a few more, conferences or other face-to-face interactions. But there is no question that over the last couple of years, this view that's on screen is very typical, right? We are all doing, heck, we're kind of doing it right now, with the webinar. But, it's, at best you have a group of people that are on the call and everybody's on screen, and that's great. But what if people aren't on screen? They're listening, but are they engaged? Are they not? What's their true level of listening, ability to listen to what I'm saying? And now imagine, right, I've got a presentation, I'm putting up a slide, I'm doing a demo. Now everybody that is 2 inches by 2 inches on my screen becomes either gone or they become barely 1 inch by 1 inch, right? So it's very difficult. So all of these factors continue to make it more challenging for us all as salespeople. But there are tools, and we're going to talk about a tool or a way to think about this, hopefully something that you can use on your interactions. But again, I'll just go back real quick to Jason, what you said and touched on earlier. There is also technology that can help, right? There's technology that can assist with this kind of struggle that we all have in understanding who's truly listening, who's engaged, who participated, and help us in this virtual environment as well. So I want to shift a little bit into EQ, or emotional intelligence. That's something, again, that's I'm super passionate about, and that is really an anchor into what myself and my team talk about every single day, because it isn't just the raw numbers and the raw information. It is really about that emotional intelligence and thinking about not only how am I presenting myself on those conversations, but also am I able to read my audience, read the room in a way that helps me understand kind of where they are, not just from a kind of, again, black and white standpoint of did they respond or am I getting the deal, but are they actually engaged? Are they actually paying attention? So you see here kind of this kind of flow. You've got your emotions that creates that attitude, and then those things combine to give me the allocation of time and resources and so on. So again, those positive and negative emotions. Are people on the call? Are they excited to be talking to you? Are they just as excited at maybe moving this into a proof of concept or into the contract phase or whatever that next step is? Are they as excited, or are they not? Are they frustrated because maybe you're not delivering what they've asked for, right? Whether that might be price or maybe functionality. Attitude, right? What's the conversations? Are they paying attention? Are they on screen? Are they attending those calls? What is that actual engagement when it comes to that? And that is, again, all of those things combine to give us or prove to us that we're going to get that money, we're going to get that deal, We're going to get that time that's necessary. If it is a great example is that proof of concept, right? Where are we going to get the time? Are we going to get the time from the IT department or whoever might be necessary? And are we going to get the right people on the call to help to make those decisions? So, I think it's definitely identifying those elements. And, oftentimes, again, we look at the real binary things, Jason, of are they showing up? Did they return the contract redlined or not? Kind of those are very binary, right? But sometimes there's almost always really, there are those underlying things of why something didn't proceed. And by taking a deeper look at some of the reasons why, then you can actually gain a lot more knowledge, and you can actually address that and kind of recharge some of those conversations. Does this make sense to you, Jason, as just as a kind of representing the audience a little bit? Does this seem like something that you see as well?
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, anybody that's been in sales at any point has wound up in that situation of like, man, everything looked like it was really tracking well, and then it like died, and I can't get in touch with them. And so then you start racking your brain like, did something go wrong? Do I bother them again? Do I reach out? Do I give them time and space? Like, what a world of difference if you've got some indication. And I mean, the classic being like somebody who's back channeling you information or something like that. But obviously that's the exception, not the rule. And it's pretty rare that you've got that type of behind the scenes intel. But anytime that you've had something like that, like what a world of difference that makes as far as like, not only just sleeping at night, but how do you actually follow up? How do you dial this in? How do you get it across the finish line? How do you course correct if something's going wrong within that? And these are absolutely huge things for anybody who's been through a selling process.
Yeah, without question. And I think the old term would be reading between the lines, right? But what does that really mean? And it truly is understanding, again, through the emails or through the actions or through the interactions that you're having, really being able to read that. So again, going back to kind of anchoring with emotional intelligence, I really want to kind of dig in a little bit here, kind of for the rest of our time in this sentiment and engagement, right? What is the sentiment that they're giving? That is that positivity? Are they expressing themselves? Are they asking questions? Are they, how are they asking those questions, right? And then engagement, are they showing up? Are they participating, right? Those two things, and as obviously in this Venn diagram, right, they overlap tremendously, but these are two kind of buckets, if you will, Jason, that you can view those interactions that you're having with a consumer or with your client, that everybody here that is listening in, this is taking place, whether you acknowledge it or not. These things are taking place on every one of those interactions that you're having. And so we want to really dig into that. And this is something that I think is a really interesting kind of viewpoint, right? Is the journey that people are generally on, right? That you see or on the surface, or even that they can almost acknowledge, is that logical journey, right? They're doing that discovery. They were tasked with getting 3 RFPs for a particular product, and they've done their their due diligence to start that process. They're going through that consideration set, right? And they're going to go down that path. But in reality, that person that has been asked to do that is also going on that emotional journey, right? They started off super excited because, hey, I got asked to do this project, or, I'm really excited to try to, get this, something for my team that's going to help them, going forward. But, as that goes, those emotions go all over the place, right? This is pretty kind of smooth, but there's really ups and downs that we all are experiencing, again, both ourselves, but also that particular buyer. And ideally, we want to meet them where they are in their journey, right? We want to be able to understand that, okay, when they're in that consideration set, there's a lot of emotions going on there, and we need to understand those things and continue to see that there are these two journeys that are taking place. If we only focus on the logical journey, we're going to miss so many signals that could really help us either win the business, win back business that, maybe they've started to kind of say, well, I think we're going to go another way, or, I'm not sure, this doesn't seem like it offers what I'm looking for. Those understanding what those signals are, right? And helping to make sure that by the end of this journey, right, we get to the what we all want and what we all hope for, which is a closed sale and a long-term client. All right, so let's get into it. Let's do a little exercise. Okay, so I encourage everybody, Jason, you as well, grab a piece of paper, scratch piece of paper, a Post-it, or if you're really good visualizing things, you can do it on your mind, right? Yep, got a little picture here, right? Just simple, right? And I really want you to think about, I want everybody to think about one of their most recent deals, right? Maybe it's a deal that is going well. Maybe it's a deal that's not going well. Maybe it's at the top of your list. Maybe it's at the middle of your target list. But this is somebody that you're having engagements with. You're having maybe 2 or 3 calls at least that you've had. And, I want you to really focus on the last conversation, right? And again, in this kind of diagram, you've got kind of sentiment on the left there, engagement on the bottom. And this is a rudimentary one. Afterwards, Jason and everybody, we're going to send out kind of a little follow-up that kind of gives a deeper dive and a lot more specific when it comes to this breakdown of this matrix, to make it even easier for you as you kind of do this manual evaluation of your conversations. But this is kind of where we're going to kind of place this last conversation. And so keep that in mind as we have it. And I want to start off with sentiment. Right, I want to talk about the sentiment of that last call that you had with that particular potential client. Right, were they not in agreement? Were they verbally, acknowledging in agreement your proposed solution? Right? Were they there? Were they kind of like, okay? Were they flat out disagreeing? Were they agreeing? Where does it lie, kind of on this, almost like a net promoter score, if you will, for this particular question? Where did they land, right? And you can mark down 1 through 5 and keep track of that number. We're going to do some adding and placement on the matrix. I'll give 2 seconds there for everybody to write that down.
While they're working on that, I mean, I know we're talking primarily in the context of sales here, but it strikes me that this type of exercise and these types of signals are valuable in all kinds of different contexts and across different
without question
teams.
Yep, no, without question, Jay. I'm glad you brought that up. This is absolutely something, and for this exercise, people can are free to do that as well. As it might be, you're trying to get a project done internally, right? You're trying to get something off the ground internally, whether that's a project, whether that's a proposal, whether that's, an action that you want to take. Maybe you want to go to a conference, right? It could be any of those things, right? These all absolutely apply to all of those interactions that you're having when you're trying to get something accomplished. Thank you for bringing that up, Jason. I appreciate that.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, and the second question, and by the way, in this kind of overall evaluation, the thing that we're going to send out, there's actually quite a few more questions, and we're just going to kind of touch on some of the top level here. But this is definitely something that we can share, that resource to do a deeper dive beyond even some of these top level questions. But were they using positive language on that conversation? Ideal, relief, perfect, right? Oh, that's amazing, right? Or were they using negative language, right? I'm not sure that's going to work. That doesn't seem like what we really need. Think about that language that they were using, and where does that fall kind of on that 1 through 5 of, are they really positive? Were they really super pumped about things, loved everything you said? Or were they kind of finding fault, if you will, with all of the different things that you were bringing up on that last call? That would be on the one side there. And then number 3, the last critical positive moments that took place in that, were those easily summarized, right? Could you think back right now, without even opening your notebook, and think about at least 3 critical positive moments that took place in in that last conversation, right? Hopefully, if they did open your notebook, those would be listed out with a 1, 2, 3, or maybe those were action items. Maybe those were, yes, I want to go ahead and move forward with the contract or whatever the case might be. But definitely, what were some of those critical moments in that last conversation? And then again, where does that fall on that 1 through 5?
Adam, I got a quick question on, especially there in number 3, given that, there's a fair bit of flexibility and room for interpretation on, positive moments. And, the one that in particular I'm thinking of is, sales call that I was on this week. And, towards the end of the call, there was a conversation with, relatively strong pushback on pricing. But it wasn't in the sense of like, I'm balking and gonna walk. It was like pretty strong arm negotiation tactics. And so for me, I would classify that as a pretty darn strong positive signal within it. But at surface level, a lot of people may look at that and be like, that was a negative signal.
Yeah, it's a good point. And it is, these are positive from the standpoint, at least the way that I view it. It's positive from the standpoint of, is that moment going to give me an opportunity to move this forward, right? So in your example of price, they are telling me, huge buying signal, what's important to them, right? If it is price, then that's great. Now I know where to focus my attention. Now I know that I need to get with my finance team and bring in, and try to see if we can drop the price or move things around or whatever the case might be. But they're giving that information, and that is very positive to the engagement. So that's a great point. It doesn't mean that they're necessarily positive, happy. It just does, but it does mean that they are giving you those signals that can help you move that forward. That's a great point. Cool. And then let's kind of shift a little bit from sentiment to engagement. And listen, something simple. Did they attend the meeting? Right? If you were supposed to have, maybe it's your champion and the somebody from the buying committee, or the person that's going to actually sign off on the spend or whatever the case might be, did they attend all of those the last couple of meetings? Right? If they did, great, give yourself a 5. If they didn't, if you're having to continually reschedule, if maybe your champion was on the call, but for whatever reason they the buying decision, or the person that's going to make that buying decision couldn't attend, and maybe they couldn't attend for the last couple, you're losing that engagement from that person whose engagement is critical to being able to close this out. So that's what number 1 is. And then kind of related to that, if that economic buyer, that person that's making that decision for number 2, if they were on the call, but maybe they weren't maybe they weren't even on screen, you could tell that they were kind of focused on something else. They sighed, they hesitated, they're coming up with, well, you know what, it's that time of year, I don't know if we're going to be able to get anything done before the holidays, right? They're giving those, kind of, pauses. They're trying to slow things down a little bit for next steps. Now that can happen, and that doesn't mean that it's dead. But if we're trying to, at the end of this, our goal is going to be, where should we spend the most of our time? That's going to give us a strong indicator of, maybe this person isn't somebody that I need to be spending all my time on right now, as I have limited resources in my time, as we talked about before, between now and the end of the year. Maybe that's somebody that, okay, I can't count on that. When my boss asks me if this is going to close by the end of the year, I'm going to have to be real and say, maybe not, but I'm going to continue to push this relationship, and I'm going to try to close it in Q1 of next year, right? That's the reality of the situation. And that's kind of one of the things that we're going to talk about as this kind of ties together, is where do we spend that time? And then number 3, again, did they ask about pricing in a neutral or positive tone of voice? This goes exactly, Jason, to your point, right? About, they made the comment, they said, hey, this is something that is important to us. Price, it's very close, but I think we need to talk through some of the details. Okay, that could be positive, right? Or they simply said, there's no way that we can pay that price or anything even remotely close. Well, that gives you a really strong ability to understand if this is something that you're at the 5-yard line or if you are just getting things kicked off. So again, 1 through 5, kind of the neutral or much more positive on the right-hand side, or on the left-hand side, a little bit more on the neutral or negative side. All right, so look back, add up your sentiment score, right? Maximum number of 15, your engagement score, maximum number of 15, right? And we're going to put it, and we're going to plot this on your matrix, right? So if your score is really high, let's say it was perfect, it was 15 out of 15. This client is basically paperwork's in their hand, and you expect it by the end of today, then they are a 15 out of 15, upper right-hand corner. That one is not something that you need to worry about too much anymore, because that thing is ready to go. If it's a low, a 1, a 2, a 3, right, it's really on the low end side, then that's something is in that bottom left, and is going to be a little bit more challenged. And then based off of your sentiment being either high or low, you would be in the upper left or the bottom right, again, on the engagement and your sentiment. Make sense? Jason, where was yours at on this list or on this matrix? Where did it land?
I was in the upper right.
Okay.
You know, as you might imagine from somebody with those types of pricing questions, like the engagement, the intent, everything was there. And so yeah, that we needed to address price, but we also needed to really hone in. And they acknowledged this, which was honestly probably the strongest intent signal and positive sentiment signal, that the other options they had at those lower prices weren't doing what we were going to be able to do.
Yeah.
And so that allowed us to really focus the conversation on value for money, as opposed to having to just go and have a pricing conversation.
Awesome. That makes sense. And what that means, right, they're in what we would call the champions group, right in the upper right. You don't need to necessarily spend a lot of time or really focus on that, except for closing it out, because you've got it in a good place. So if you had, 10 different, potential clients that you were trying to get closed, Jason, that one's kind of on, hopefully, sounds like is on cruise control, going to get over the finish line, right? If it was in high sentiment, right, but maybe lower engagement, your upper left, right? We call that the distracted champs, right? They believe in it, but maybe their engagement, right, has been a little bit challenged, right? They are, again, we just got through Thanksgiving. We're coming up on Christmas and New Year's, Hanukkah, right? Timing is challenged right now at this time of year. Maybe they're also at the end of their fiscal year. So their engagement might be lower, but they are really excited about the proposition of using your solution. That distracted champ is a great spot to be focused on. The bottom right, those are pretty high engagement, but they're kind of not there yet, right? They're not exactly ready to sign. They're ready to move forward. They like you. They kind of like the product, but maybe they have an incumbent product that they're already, like more, or it's good enough, right? And the hassle of changing things, is a little bit more difficult. So in that bottom right, we call that the challengers bucket. And that's definitely, one that is going to take more time, right? Or it's just not going to get there because, that they're going to stick with a solution that they already have or that they've kind of already invested in. And then the bottom left, right? Hopefully nobody on this call picked somebody that is on the bottom left, but kind of call that the cold fish, right? They're not really engaged. Their sentiment's low. Now, does that mean that you should go into your CRM and close them out? Maybe you should mark them closed, lost, mark it up as I'll check back with you in a couple months. Maybe that's the case. But if you don't close them out, maybe right now, if you have, again, those limited resources between now and the end of your fiscal year, that you've got to try to get 1, 2, 4 deals done, and you've got 10, 20, or 40 deals that are potential or opportunities that are out there, maybe the cold fish isn't where your time is going to be best served, because you have so far to bring them into that kind of upper right-hand side, in that upper right-hand corner, that you're just going to run out of time if you try to do that. Right. And go ahead, Jason, you were going to say something?
Yeah, I love this because it maps pretty closely with something that I use to illustrate, sort of project management with new team members on my side. And so, similar 4 quadrants. So you've got on a vertical axis, amount of effort, you've got a horizontal axis, amount of, reward, impact, whatever. And so you wind up with 4 quadrants. You've got, high effort, low impact. You've got, high effort, high impact. You've got low effort, high impact, and you've got low effort, low impact. And, it's same story. You wind up with, high effort, low impact. You ignore that, all of that gets dropped. Anything that is, high impact, low effort, you drop everything else and you do that before anything else. And then you try and do a balanced mix of, big rocks you're trying to achieve against that are going to take a lot of effort, but have a big impact. And then, quick wins on the other side of it. And the cool thing about this is this layers with that same strategy, because what you're talking about here is in a lot of ways the amount of effort that's going to go into turning this into a closed deal. And so if you look at that relative to the impact side of it, like there may be some of those cold fish where the payoff is so huge that it's worth continuing to chip away at it. Or there may be some cold fish where like the impact is negligible and it's like, all right, there's no reason for us to waste any more time with it.
Yeah. No, and I think there's a couple things I want to unpack there, Jason. I think first off, I'm glad you brought that up, because what you're talking about is much more of that binary, right? It's time and effort, or it's money, outcome and effort, right? And those are pretty binary. And if you just looked at that, right, you could get tied up going after a big fish, right? Using all these fish metaphors, going after a big fish that there's zero chance that you're going to be able to bring them in the time frame. And again, I want to kind of level set this, in a broad, if you were just looking at unconstrained time, right, then you might have some different thoughts here. But I really want people to look at this on between now and the end of the quarter, right? Or if you were, let's say your fiscal quarter ended in March. All right, I'm more than halfway through my fiscal year. Where should I be focusing, right? And so depending on that amount of time that you have, where you want to spend that little bit of time that you have to spare, again, that upper right-hand corner is kind of on autopilot. Keep spending the time, but you shouldn't need to spend too much time because they're in a good spot. But unlike your example in the upper left, this upper left, right, those distracted champions, right, they're close, right? All you need to do is re-engage them. They already believe in the product, but you need to figure out a way to carve out just a little bit of time, right? And from their standpoint. And that can be fairly easy, in all things considered here, easier to get. And now you can move them from that upper left to the upper right, and you can move those forward. If their sentiment's low, that takes a lot longer. We all know as salespeople that it takes a lot longer to gain that back. And again, from the cold fish standpoint, the bottom left, doesn't mean that they're off the table. It just means that they are a really, really, really big long shot that would require a ton of time on from your perspective and theirs to close in a short window. Right now, long term, absolutely couldn't agree with you more, Jason. That's where, on January 1st, when you've closed all your business for the year and you're starting off, that's where you go, okay, how do I start to move some of these, from the, bottom left or bottom right and continue to re-engage? But in a short span of time, if you need to focus on that, where should you be doing it? Again, it's in that upper left where all you've got to do is try to carve out a little bit of extra time, maybe convince them to get up a little earlier and get on a call, or be willing to kind of carve out, instead of 45 minutes or an hour, 15 or 30 minutes to get on the calendar and continue to move that forward. So that's where that's important.
Yeah, it reminds me, it's slightly different, context, but the very first B2B SaaS company I was at, is a extremely high volume, low to no touch PLG free trial motion. Yep. And so my reps did not have enough time, and it was not cost effective to have them go sit down and have a sales conversation with every one of them. Because we were talking 2,500, 3,000 trial starts a month at the time that I left. And so, using tech and deploying that and using that to have visibility into what people were doing within the app, I was able to do essentially this and say, okay, these are the ones that are tracking well, so you don't need to spend a whole lot of time or attention or effort here. Here are the ones that like failed to launch, so it's going to be a heavy lift and probably not worth the time and effort to go try and do that. It's these in the middle that are sort of on the edge. That's where you need to spend your time and effort, because that's where you're going to move the needle, and that's where you're going to be most efficient, most effective with it. And that was a game changer for us to be able to bring that sort of organization and insight into what they were doing, because otherwise it was sort of a free-for-all. It was like, hey, I've got 200 trial starts and I'm going to try and get back to all of them.
And that's, again, I think it's a couple things that, to kind of, as we kind of wrap up here, Jason, it is again thinking about those emotional elements, that sentiment and engagement, something that I don't think a lot of us do really well. You really have to kind of pause yourself and make yourself think about that. Again, from your standpoint too, if you go into these yourself with either you're making it hard to engage, or you're kind of distracted because you're trying to type up a recap email from your last meeting while you're talking to the next meeting, right? Your engagement's low, or your sentiment is off because you're trying to rush something because you feel pressure, but that person on the other end doesn't have that same pressure, right? It goes both ways. And, kind of back to, what you were talking there of where we spend our time, right? If you can really understand those motivations, you can really take a look at those at-risk deals, pull them in the upper right. And I grabbed this quote, it's funny. I actually was talking with our marketing team this morning, and I for some reason, I thought this quote was about chickens, but apparently Confucius was a rabbit fan. So it's actually chase two rabbits, catch none, right? That's what this is about. If you have, between now and the end of your fiscal year or end of your month, whatever you're trying to target, and you've got 10 or 15 or 20 opportunities, you're not going to get them all. You're just not going to get them all. And if you try to get them all, you're going to probably get none, right? But if you can really focus on the ones that are truly in a position where it takes a little bit more engagement to move them on and get them closed up, then you have a much better chance of closing those deals and coming in strong at the end of your fiscal year. And again, this is something that ideally you can do all the time, and you kind of overlay kind of priority and so on every quarter, every month, whenever you're trying to think about, even on a daily basis, of what you should be focused on that particular day if you have a limited amount of time.
Yeah, there's one piece that you touched on that I want to really highlight is the element of this is a two-way interaction.
Yeah.
So, there's what you've got signaling coming from the other side of it across the table from you, but there's also how you set the stage for that and how your interactions drive that. And so somebody that's really sophisticated is using this not only to hone in on the deals and opportunities that you need to pay more attention to, spend more time and effort on, but it's also a feedback learning cycle on what did I do here? What was effective? Hey, I did this slightly differently, or, I got 4 hours of sleep last night. I didn't have the energy. So that's likely an impact there. Or like, man, I really came in and was ready for this, and I'd done my due diligence, and I was feeling good and confident and all of that stuff. And so they can actually take this as feedback for themselves as to what they're doing well and what they're not. And then, really start, testing and trying to hone in on their own soft skills within all of this as well.
Yeah, no, there's no question. There's no question. And again, as I kind of wrap things up here, and we've got about 10 minutes, we can take some questions. If anybody in the audience has any questions, they can drop them in. But, at the end of the day, we're going to send out this, this document. It lets you take a little bit of a deeper dive. I love talking about this. Be more than happy. Anybody wants to connect with me on LinkedIn, follow or connect, reach out. There's my direct email. I would be happy to kind of walk through, answer questions, and kind of talk about this a little bit more. And again, I'm just going to go back to, one of the things that you said very early on, Jason, that we talked about a little bit, is that this is all great, but there's also technology that can help make this even easier and help identify, on those calls that you're having, in those virtual interactions, where is that sentiment and engagement? Selfish plug for sales, right? That's something that we really love, and we feel like we've built something that's pretty awesome to do that. But overall, this is definitely something that I'm passionate about, and anybody that wants to reach out, I'm more than happy to have that conversation.
Awesome.
I'm actually, if you have any questions that are out there, I'm going to actually drop in real quick into the chat a couple of links to this as well. Have we gotten any questions?
I haven't seen any yet. Anybody on my team that's seeing anything on LinkedIn Live, send those over, and we'll answer those while we wait. I'm interested to hear just a little bit of kind of the more philosophical or foundational background on this. Like, where are you guys pulling a lot of the data and insights around this? I was telling Tim earlier, I mean, this probably is telling about me that just for fun, I started getting into a lot of like nudge theory and behavioral economics and stuff like that, and a lot of that's underlying all of these things. And to me, it's just fascinating learning how little we actually are in control and how much of it is like we're telling stories of ourselves versus like what's actually driving it. And if you've not read the happiness hypothesis, he's got a great analogy for it of a rider on an elephant. So our rational selves are the rider, the elephant is our emotional side. And so a rider on an elephant's not going to get an elephant to go too far away from what it wants to do. And so at the end of the day, like we're just barely sort of nudging things in one direction or the other, and largely telling ourselves a story about why we did that.
No, that's a fantastic one. I think that for us, a lot of it comes back to selfless. Again, we've got this is a book that we Daniel Goleman, Emotional Intelligence 2.0. He wrote the original, Daniel Goleman did, and then there's the 2.0 version here from Travis Bradbury and Gene Greaves. These are kind of things that we've gone back to as an organization and really believe that those foundational elements of emotional intelligence, right? That's really understanding ourselves. Again, emotional intelligence is something that can be important and is important in our relationships, friends, family, children, spouses, just as much as, if not more, of course, than our business relationships. And that is internally, our bosses, the people that we interact with, and then potential clients and so on. So, it's really about human interaction and the science of human interaction. People buy from people that they trust. There's an element of trust there, and it's certainly something that all of these things all factor in. And I think if we could start to shift away from being so dependent on just what's the deal value and what's that logo, how important is that logo, and so on, when we're trying to put our time in, especially when we have limited time or when we're trying to come up against the end of a quarter or fiscal year.
Yeah, I think one thing that this highlights that doesn't get enough time or attention is you run into a lot of salespeople. I'm very happy to say it's not the majority. It's a unfortunately vocal minority, where it's like sales at all cost, or like hard-hitting tactics or whatever. And I'm starting to teach business ethics again at UT in the spring, and so these are kind of things front and center in conversations I'll be having with students. But this emotional side of it really highlights how important it is to do this and do things in the right way that build and maintain relationships and those human interactions and stuff like that, because you're not going to get away with that type of thing for very long. And if you look at the careers of salespeople that use that other side of it and those hard tactics and stuff like that, there's a reason they don't tend to stay at that organization very long, because now they've exhausted all of that. And and it's once you've gone through your initial rounds within that, like you've exhausted it, you got nobody coming back, you've got no word of mouth that's positive and bringing people back into it.
Absolutely, Jason. And they might convince or push somebody into that first deal, but they're not going to they're not going to buy again. They're not going to renew because they didn't have a good experience getting on there, and they kind of go into it with a, I guess, mentality, right? They're not excited, right? You want that person to be excited about it. And I think that all of this really helps to, as salespeople, again, that we move away from how many activities, how many calls did you have this week? How many, and how many good ones? How many great relationships did you build this week? How many clients are you growing and getting to that place where they're excited to sign? They're pumped. They're almost like, hey, can we do this sooner? Like, that's one of the best things you could ever get, right? It's like, hey, our implementation usually takes 60 days. Oh, can we do it sooner than that? It's like, I love that. Now I got to go back and I got to grab some more sources and see if we can make that happen. But like, those are great things to have. And if you have somebody that's asking for that, they're going into it with such a great attitude that it's going to succeed. There's no question it's going to succeed. But again, if you drag them to that point, if you beat them up enough that they finally say yes, the odds of them actually using the product and really seeing that value are going to be reduced as well.
Yeah, that's something I've told my reps all along. I was like, if you're performing and you're getting, the qualified meetings, you're getting the opportunities, you're closing the deals, I could not care less what your activities look like. If you can come in and blow out, expectations and KPIs and stuff like that and work a 4-hour week, by all means, do it. Like, I'm not going to say I don't care, because I care, because I want us to all learn how you're doing that.
Yeah.
But I'm not going to object to you being that efficient and going and using your time to do whatever, because clearly you're doing something with that free time that's enabling you to be able to be that efficient within it. But and then the flip side of it is, like, if you're not hitting those numbers and then we've got no choice to go dig into those metrics and activities, it's like, it's probably not going to work at all at this point anyway. And the numbers and the activities are not really going to be the answer to the problem.
Well, and that goes back to, Jason, to one of the slides earlier about burnout, right?
Yeah.
I guarantee you on this call that, listening in today, there are people that are like, I work 50 to 60 hours a week. I am constantly trying to, get time with my, with clients. I'm up early because it's West Coast, East Coast, or, I'm like, and I'm struggling. I'm just not getting my, hitting my goals, etc. This is a great way to take a step back and say, okay, maybe you could dial that back to 35 to 40 hours where it probably should be, but spend your time more critically on the deals that need to be dealt with right now, and really do a great job at those, and not try to spend every waking moment on every single open opportunity, as well as searching for new opportunities and so on. So it can definitely burn you out. So this helps you kind of focus in on where you can truly make that impact. But I think we only have a couple of minutes. I don't see any questions. You, Jason, in there in the mix. I don't want to push everybody.
Yeah, no, I don't believe so.
Okay.
But if anybody has one, drop it in here at the last minute. We'll be sure to get to it. We'll also get a recap email out to everybody.
Sure.
They can absolutely reply to that email if they've got additional questions, want any additional insight information, how to get in touch with anybody. And then of course we're all available via email, LinkedIn, all of that stuff. So we've got your information right there. And so be sure to reach out, ask any questions, figure out anything additional that you need to learn.
Absolutely. And this, Jason, I really appreciate you and Red Genius giving us time and allowing us to come in and talk about something that we're so passionate about. Listen, I hope you have everybody that has a fantastic holiday season, and a great rest of your week. And again, thank you very much for your time.
Awesome. Thank you so much. This has been near and dear to my heart. So it's been a blast.
Awesome. Thanks, Jason. Thanks, everybody.
All right. Thanks.